Hi, and welcome to Kahawa Nagowi. This is a podcast. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's a podcast where you want to have a conversation with the pastor, but you can't. You can have it here with your host, Gowi Marco Dinge, your host. I'm here with Marion Mwangi. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
I have been waiting to have you here. The last time I wanted to have you on my on this
He's
place.
He's about to lie.
I asked you, you're like, okay, yeah. And then you came back to me and said, oops, I'm not going to be in the country. So you left me.
For context, he asked me and then said, I'll call you. Called me 6 months later. Can you come next week? I was traveling, which is not even a good represent. But at least this time you asked me, I was like, yes, for sure.
So
for sure.
I'm glad you've agreed to come
thank
here.
You, Koi.
And just a little about yourself. In like 30 seconds. Don't talk too much.
Goi introduced me to himself a few minutes ago. We know each other from way back, but he said I'm a working mother, which is true.
Yes.
But my name is Marion Jerry Mwangi. I am, a wife, a mom, a worker.
Yes.
I'm also currently employed as the Director of Customer Insights at Elite, and I have a startup called Changecraft, amongst many other things.
So I've known you to be in advertising.
You have.
I've known you to be in advertising a lot. And let me just throw this thing on the here, all right? Today we're going to talk about feminism and marriage.
Yeah.
All right. Can a feminist be happy in marriage?
So, in fact, when Goi asked me about this thing, I was like, one, first, I think it's flattering that you think I'm a feminist. I was like, that's an interesting, because I'd want to ask you, weird, right? To ask you a question as you ask me a question.
I'm the one who asks questions.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, would you define, why did you choose Marion? Is it that you define me as a feminist?
Marion, you've been a champion for what I know of in a very quiet way, but also subtle way, but also very authoritative way about who a woman is, the power of a woman. I remember we went for a wedding, Uko in Makueni. I don't know if you remember that wedding. Koira's bro. Remember when we were out in, and we were out, this is inside for one of those shows. And we were talking, and I mean, I don't know who there was there, but I don't know what he said about women. And man, you came out strong about it. I was like, you go, girl. You put the guy in his place in the conversation. But it was one of the visitors who was at that, I think, and it was after the thing. So I was like, yeah, I see you have, and you're also very well grounded. Nimekuona, I've been looking at you from a distance and have appreciated your perspective on issues. And that's why I have you here.
Okay.
So, we can have these conversations that we won't have with your pastor.
So, I mean, the reason I'm asking for that context is just to state, of course, I'm not one guy. I'm not like a known feminist, but I am a feminist for all intents and purposes. And just to be clear, a feminist is someone who, let's just say, believes that women should deserve the basic human rights that every other human being should receive, right? Regardless of gender. But acknowledging that women tend to have less of those rights, right? Because ideally, a feminist should care for both sexes. But I think the angle has always been that women currently don't have them, so we're advocating for them. So to the question, can feminists be happy in marriage? Of course. I think, for me, that's such an oxymoron, because I'm like, the idea is that a feminist, a woman, an empowered woman can choose to get married and therefore should ideally be in a happy marriage because she had the choice for it, you know? But I do also acknowledge that there's this whole wave of radical, I want to call it radical feminism, that believes I don't need a man. Which means I'm not so sure, and I think we see it even in the US, that I don't think as many women are getting married as much anymore. But in my context, I would say I'm a feminist, and I think I'm very happy in my marriage.
How long have you been married now?
I've been married 13 years.
You never invited me to your wedding.
My goodness, I was 22. I don't even think...
You didn't invite me to your wedding.
Hey, first of all, when you're 22, I think your parents invite everyone for you. I think my guess this was like 20 people.
So you married young.
I married very young.
You're one of the youngest people.
I was very young.
Yes.
And I was so in love. And part of me also wonders whether that's what's made it easier, because I feel like my feminism has evolved in a marriage context already. So if I'm honest, Goyi, I don't know if I was 35 today, if I'd continued the trajectory of my thinking without having a partner who's challenging me, I'm not so sure I'd be saying what I'm saying.
You know, your partner is a thinker.
Yeah, he's a thinker. He's a
He's
thinker.
like a serious thinker.
He's a thinker. And he's also challenged me when I say some of the things I say. It's like, are you sure? Let's chambua this, you know? But yes, you should. Of course you should.
So the idea and the word out there, their perception about a feminist. A feminist is independent. It does not need male or masculine energy to become the woman that she is.
Okay.
So how does a feminist in that thrive in a marriage? So that's why I ask. I mean, can they really be happy in a marriage?
Okay, so one, I don't think that's true feminism. So there's this whole debate around, which is interesting. Feminism argues that women should have the same rights, right?
Yes.
But there's another angle of feminism that argues that I need to become more like a man to get those rights. Okay? Which tends to lean more towards the second version, which is I can satisfy myself sexually, I can satisfy myself financially, I can satisfy myself emotionally. I don't need a man. I am fully independent as a unit on myself, right? That is not, I wouldn't define that as feminism. I actually think that's an issue with, that's an identity issue around what is womanhood. It feels more of that's a gender dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Feminism for me is I'm a woman and I shouldn't be seen as less than a man, right?
Okay. So let me see. Feminist and feminist movement has evolved over the years.
Correct.
All right. See, it has. And this is a perspective. It has been disturbingly for me become more anti-family, anti-marriage. So what is it about this that I'm not getting or I'm not appreciating?
Okay. That's a very good question.
Is it a fair question?
Okay, it is a fair question. So, actually, this is a really rough analogy. But let me start by saying, I think this question is very difficult to ask if you don't, depending on where your basis of identity comes from.
Yeah.
Right? So let me assume for the sake of discussion that you're a believer. You're someone who believes God created male and female, right? And he created them equally, right? I think the first problem, honestly, Goyi, has been that feminism came from the perspective that women were being looked down upon. And let me even use the marriage context, right? You get married, and I'm sure we've always gone for weddings. Even you're a pastor, you probably said this in a wedding. You know, wives submit to your husbands.
I've not just said it.
Yeah.
It's in the Bible,
Right. No,
Marion.
I agree. But pastors rarely do husbands love their wives. They teach the second half of that sermon, right? And you're like, am I marrying myself? And often I'm always like, one, does that verse apply to non-believers? I've often wondered.
Yes.
But two, fine, you teach submission.
Yes.
But I think what we've often struggled is communicating submission has nothing to do with inferiority, right? So when you come into it, there's this narrative that both men and women in marriage have, that the man is more superior than the woman, or in society, the men are more superior, which is why men were being hired, women were not. Men are paid more, women are not. Men lead the home, women do not, right? It communicates inferiority, which is why feminism has come to say, we're not inferior, excuse you, I'm just as, if not better than, you in leadership, in finances, in marriage. But feminism, God's design was never that. It was never an inferiority complex issue, right? Because Jesus submits to God. And yet Jesus is God. They're completely equal. So in a true sense, I am not trying to lead my marriage because I don't think I'm inferior than T. But as long as I'm entering the relationship with you as my husband thinking, Madam, you're done with the fruit, calm down. And of course, we're going to have this battle because I'm trying to prove to you that I'm worthy of being listened to. I'm worthy of advising. I'm worthy of giving investment decisions. So if you don't have that, I think that is why men are beginning to feel like, shucks, this woman wants to take over the finances. This woman wants to take over, decisions around which family do you go to in December, in Christmas. This woman wants to take over, how many. So I think men are struggling with why is she making the decisions? But I almost feel like God would say, I never said she was never meant to make them with you to begin with.
Allow me to summarize. I summarize the overall premise of marriage as sacrifice and submission.
Correct.
It's a journey of sacrifice and submission for the man and for the woman. All right? Submission and sacrifice for the woman looks different. Submission and sacrifice for the man looks different. Feminism seems to challenge this premise. Help me understand how the feminist views marriage or defines a healthy, flourishing one.
If Marin is a radical feminist, what I would tell you is a truly empowered woman would choose when she wants to be married and when she does not, and can choose to leave or remain in that marriage at will. Radical feminism argues that a woman has every right to make choices, to trust herself to guide her choices around reproductive health, around marriage, around finances. But I say radical feminism, right? True feminism, from Marian's perspective, argues that I don't have all the answers, right? But even without knowing all the answers, I'm truly valuable and fully worthy of the same choices that men get, which are two different things. So Marian's not trying to argue that I know everything. You know what I mean? But that's what you're actually describing is true. It's radical feminism, which has told women you don't even need to be married. You can be in open relationships. You can divorce your husband. You can have two boyfriends. After all, haven't men been doing it for years, right? It teaches us to dismantle, right? Dismantle and own what the men have owned. Men used to cheat on us, even you cheat on them. Men used to sleep around, even you sleep on them. Men used to hoard the money, even you hoard the money. But this man doesn't want to be a man. So I'm not trying to chase those definitions. For me, true, and let me even give you a different perspective. And this one, I don't know if you talk about, is this a PG podcast, first of all?
Just talk.
Okay, noted.
Conversation you have with a pastor that you don't. So have it.
So let's go into the issue of sex, right?
Yes.
So if you've been to a male bridal, what do they call them? Stag night? Let me say a Christian one, because Christian ones have their own dynamic and a female one. When you attend a female bridal shower, a lot of what you're taught about is pleasing your husband, right? How do you make sure he's always satisfied and happy?
Tell me, I've not been in those ones.
Right. And often I've sat in, and if I remember one particular advice I had, which was, even if you don't feel like having sex, the reason you continue to do it is your body will eventually get used to it, right? I thought that's a weird way of phrasing it. Fine.
Were you married at that time when you had that?
I think I was just getting married.
Okay.
And then I remember my husband went for certain stag nights where the advice men would be told there is, first, how not to be afraid of it, right, sex, but to deal with the performance anxiety. So his was more of, you're the performer, but also happy wife, happy life. So men get the advice on perform, make sure she's always happy. Women get the advice of don't stop, right? Don't stop doing it. When I had my first child, I come out of giving birth, and you know that 6-week visit where you're finally being given the green light to continue in your duties by the doctor. And one of my biggest struggles was I just didn't feel like. Right? My body just doesn't feel like. And while I kept talking to Christian women and they're like, just do it. I was like, I do not for the life of me imagine that God created my sexual organs purely to endure. There was something very odd about that piece of advice. I'm like, why would God spend so much time making a woman's body so specific only for you to just endure? Right? And at the same time, T was ironically going through his own conversation with Mungu around this chick now. So you told me this, my right, and we should never correct, right? And the two things that I'll say, which is I think it's a perfect example of feminism, is honestly, and this may sound weird, but I remember recognizing that God also gave me the desire for pleasure. And my desire for pleasure is just as important as his desire for pleasure, right? Yeah. And in fact, it's the first time it hit me, if I'm not enjoying having sex with my husband, even Mungu is like, why? Yeah. Even him is in the store for this is something worth unpacking.
Yes.
It's not to be ignored for the sake of the man's enjoyment. Now, on the flip side, he was also having a conversation where God told him, if you've never had sex with you again, that's not the reason you married her. So you also need to deal with idolatry around those expectations. Anyway, we can have another podcast discussion about how that went, but I think it's a fantastic demonstration of what empowerment of a man and woman looks like in marriage. which is that your needs are as important as mine. And your husband is not just watching you and saying, go girl, but he's saying, I want to help unpack why you're not enjoying it as well. Right?
So
Yeah.
the
If that
problem.
has helped.
No, it has. It has. As I told you when we said this off air, is that I want to learn.
Yeah.
I want to learn authoritatively because the more and more I talk to feminists and people who come and the feminists who I've met, especially the younger ones, I look at them and I was like, you get married. This feminism thing is going to change. Okay? Because there's a certain posture of wanting to be right. There's a posture of correcting wrongs.
Okay.
And some even come out across, at least to me, has been combative. And I was like, okay. I'm like, let's see how that would play out in marriage.
So let me give you another example, which is in line with that. So
but I have a theory to add that, but you finish.
I am very strong-willed. That is true. And so when T and I would have an argument, he's my husband, I'm very combative. Combative is let me use a professional word.
Yeah.
I'm open to conflict.
Yes.
I'm like, conflict is not a bad thing.
Yes.
It's a tell T,
Yeah.
explain to me why.
Yes.
And T came from just apologize.
Yes.
Okay. So there are many instances going where T and I would have a fight, and his belief was apologize first. When what Marion desired the most was to be engaged in discussion, right? And so it's interesting because I feel like when we say we are combative, I don't know why, and I say this even for me, the interpretation of that has been you don't want to be challenged. When sometimes what I think an empowered woman is actually saying is, I'm worthy of being challenged. Challenge me.
So here's my theory.
Right.
You view it, it's like, yes, the problem is not feminism. The problem is there are more empowered women getting into marriage, and the average man does not know how to handle it. Is that a fair statement?
Halfway. I would say that the challenge is that we have a generation where women are being empowered and men are realizing how disempowered they were before.
How disempowered
they were before. I don't think the version of the world we had before was empowering to men going. And let me give you an example, right? When a woman gives birth, dads are almost avoided for the first 1 year of their child's life because you're told you have no value in that process.
They don't feature.
Right? But that is unfair.
In fact, let me speak for dads.
From Dania Rojo and Yambie.
That first year, all the attention that we had has gone to the toy, especially the first toy. This is why I say engage dads, unleash their wrath on discipline on the first child, because they've been in competition. That's a theory I have. I want to be unpacked.
That's true. I can see that theory.
Took my wife away from me.
But I'm like, are you telling me a father doesn't want the pleasure of being intimate with his 3-month-old? Like, part of me, I remember the times I watched that and I'm like, you're missing out.
It's different.
Right?
It's different. It's different, Marion. And let me explain to you. It's more of you have enjoyed the relationship and then this is somebody new. So what you need to be able to do is adjust. So we don't know how the woman is adjusting. This is her first time. She doesn't know a thing. There's no textbook. There's no manual that came with the kid.
Correct.
So she wants to be the best mother that she can.
Correct, yep.
Okay? She wants to show up here. And this guy is an adult. All right? So you are concentrating on your now major responsibility as a mother. You're the primary caregiver for this child, at least for another year or two before the child begins to do that. And so the mother might not be aware of that change, but also the man might not be aware of even the challenges his partner is going through.
Okay, so let me challenge that.
I'm giving a context.
Let me challenge that.
Yes.
Okay, so when I had my child, I was also very aware that I couldn't carry the burden on my own, right? And so one of the things that I know I was very intentional about was T, you also birthed or were part of this process. You will be a present father. Actually, it is one of the things him and I have. He's challenged me around how feminism even prescribes roles in advance to the unsuspecting victim, right? Because I came to him and I told him, you will be spending time with the child. You will bottle feed at least one feed a night, because I wanted to involve him in the process, right? And I remember when my first child was 3 months old and T was with her in the living room. And I think I walked in and asked him, what are you guys doing? And he's like, we're chilling. But he was watching a football game. I was like, that's not chilling. You need to spend intentional time with the child, right?
He was watching futa.
And his logic is, this is the most that I can do. But what I'm trying to say, instead of taking too long, is that T began to learn how to engage an infant. And it's not something he was taught. It's something he learned by virtue of having an infant in front of him and having a woman who's saying, you will have a relationship with this child even when they can't speak, even at this age when everyone else says, I should be the only and primary caregiver, right? Now, if you ask T now, the reason he enjoys his children is because he honestly figured out how to develop a relationship with them, even at that age. And part of me began to wonder how many men, right, have been socialized to believe that there's certain spaces you don't engage in because you're a man. On the reverse, there's certain things that women don't engage in because we've been told they're for a woman. So I think the challenge we're having now is that women are beginning to say, actually, there's spaces I can enter. And men have not been equally taught what spaces can you also come into. So I don't even know if it's that men should sit around and learn how to deal with empowered women. I wonder, maybe the question becomes, do you really think men are as empowered to begin with, right?
So if you are sitting in a room with 22, 23-year-olds, self-professed feminists.
Feminist ladies.
What would you tell them about marriage? And the institution, how do they approach?
I think the strongest definition of power is letting go. If you're still angry, if you still feel you're fighting for something, then I don't think you've reached it. And marriage will be very difficult for you, because marriage needs you to come in assuming power has already been given to you and you're not claiming it, right? And so I actually think a true feminist realizes, you're right, I can't do everything a man can do maybe, but I don't want to. I don't have to. I can choose to work. I don't have to. I can choose to thrive in a particular space, but I have no desire to. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong. It's like an oxymoron, right? I can open the door for myself, but I don't want to go eat. I can sleep alone, but I don't want to. I can comfort myself, but I don't want to. It has nothing to do with power and combativeness. So speaking to the 23, 24-year-old feminists, and they're still fighting, I'd probably say, I don't think you're done yet fighting for what you're fighting for. Now, maybe what I would actually ask them is, I hope what you're fighting for is worth it. I hope it's not based on an idea that you'll ever reach a place where you feel like, I've gotten all the power I needed. I think for me, if I remember, the example I give is, when I started working, my husband is a pastor. And one of the biggest challenges I had with Mungu is I wanted to be a kept woman.
A kept woman?
A kept woman. But pastors don't necessarily earn, at least not, if you're a legit pastor, you're not earning in the billies. We're not the US, right? And I was like, Lord, you've decided that my portion is that I shall be a working woman. Like, I was like, clearly, this is the decision that he's made for me. Right? And mine is oxymoron. I want it clear. I didn't go into corporate career world to grow because I think it was just clear. Mungu was like, no, your husband, I want him to do this work. And how decide that I will provide for the families through the work of your hands. Right? And I was like, what? And the irony is, God has truly blessed the work of my hands, truly blessed it. And now we're reaching a place where now T is working. And I can feel Mungu about to say, now you want to be kept. Now your moment is about to arrive. But it is to say, it is coming.
It's coming.
But it is to say, if you ask me in that moment, empowerment actually meant me doing something I didn't necessarily want to do, but I could do it. And yet I was happy to do it because I'm loved. What I was gaining, it's such a weird oxymoron, but I'm like, if you truly, truly have experienced love and you're secure in your identity, I don't think you'll struggle with letting go.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. For marriages of feminists that are steady on this, the joke from us men has been, umse
Amekaliwa.
amekaliwa. Amekaliwa. And men of feminists choose peace over drama.
That is true. I don't even think men are feminists. I think men generally choose peace over drama, period. Even submissive, honestly, I've seen it. Even when there's no need to choose peace, they've chosen peace.
But this sounds so miserable.
It is. So again, that example I'll give you, as I told you, I'm very, honestly, back in the day, I used to start arguments with T for no reason. Like, he didn't see it. And he'd really apologize. And I remember I told him, do you know what you're apologizing for? And he's like, no. And I was like, I remember telling him, T, the reason I married you is because I knew you could take me and you could handle it. And so while what you see as combat, and maybe for me, I'm not saying for other women, but I tell him what I actually desire to be challenged. It is unloving to allow me to walk around this earth thinking I'm the most correct person, that I'm the only one who's ever wronged. Do you know what kind of mother I'll be? Do you know what kind of human I'll be if I always think I'm correct? And yet my husband has always allowed me in the home to perceive that I am correct. And I remember telling T, granted, I need to learn better about how I communicate, right? My challenges. And I'll take that. I was like, I was not taught how to argue in respect, right? But I was like, you also need to love me with my combativeness. And how do we find a middle ground, right? And one of the things that he started doing, because T used to say, I think faster than him in an argument, but he thinks deeper. So 2 minutes after I've left, he's like, that was actually the real issue. And so he started writing me letters. So he'd write me a letter and he'd leave it on the side of the bed. And I'd come home and I'd read. And because I want to be combative, but he's not there to fight, I have no one to fight with, I'd actually be able to think about it and realize, oh, actually, I think I was wrong in this particular way of dealing. Now, maybe the thing that men perhaps we should do is maybe, what are the new tactics for dealing with a woman who thinks faster than you, who's been taught to guard herself, who's on edge, who's had to grow up in a society that she's had to fight for herself so much, doesn't
This
even
way
know.
you've been socialized.
Right,
and all
right.
that, yes.
How do we help them realize I'm not fighting you, babe? What are the ways we approach? I don't know. What are the ways you love her into recognizing she can let go?
Is this an insecurity?
I mean, yes, it is. So the other one, I don't even know if I've told Goy this story, because the last time we met with Goy, I'd just taken a sabbatical.
Yes.
And I was saying how I was struggling with not being at work. And I was like, what? I didn't think work was an identity crisis for me. And I realized it did.
And I told you.
Right?
I told you, ha ha.
You're like, yeah, here you go. But something interesting happened about 3 months ago. So my husband, he got a second job. Like, rather, his employer knew another organization was hiring and they felt, actually, I think T can do both roles. So he got both roles. And for the first time in our home, his paycheck is beginning,
substantive.
Right?
Yes.
And I was...
Shh, let's not tell Kiare.
And I was struggling, Goy.
You were struggling.
I was struggling.
Yeah.
And even, in fact, I remember, I don't even
First,
know
does
what
he know you were
happened.
struggling?
I told him later.
Okay.
And I think there's one day, I think I was just chilling somewhere and I was telling a friend of mine about T. And I was like, oh, imagine he got the second job and he's doing so well. And I felt myself acknowledge, I don't think I've ever spoken about him like that before. I don't think I've ever spoken about my husband as being perhaps more gifted than me in areas I thought we had similar competencies.
But you know, you are also smart.
True.
You are outgoing.
I agree.
You are. I shouldn't stop. I should just
Proceed,
continue
right?
going.
Rewind. And even T tells me that, but that doesn't mean T is also not those things. And that's the thing about feminism. We hear a lot how fantastic we are because feminism is about me. But it was the first time I realized, I am married to an amazing man. And I have been so self-absorbed in building myself up that I never realized. Actually, it's almost like Mungu told me, the only reason you shine more than him is because you work. If I told my friend, the only reason you're winning the race is because you're running alone. If you and your husband are in the same company, I'm not actually sure I'd be promoted over T. Like, and going, I was like, what? I'm not the superstar in this marriage. Mungu, you're serious? And I remember telling T, it is the first time I realized this is how men get threatened when their wives start rising. It's not because they don't love them. It's because they've lived in a world where the only narrative, the only song has been about them, which is actually one of the deep challenges I have with feminism is that it's only about the woman. And so what happens is when a woman reaches a point where she must acknowledge that that's not the truth, we struggle. As I remember even calling T for dinner and I told him, imagine you won't believe it, but I'm struggling. Something that should be a source of joy for the household income, I'm insecure about it, which means my identity was actually in being the superstar in the marriage, right? And please know, I'm a lovely wife, by the way, for context. Like, he never even hit T, this was my struggle. He was like, what? You, Marianne? I'm like, imagine. But it was Mungu doing this isn't about you. The reason you are empowered, the reason God has allowed me to be as favored, the skill sets, my passion, my thinking capacity is not for myself. But feminism tells you it is about yourself. True empowerment says, look at me, I have the privileges of these things, but they're not for me only.
So, So what I would say you are doing is exploring or redefining what feminism is.
For myself, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually challenging myself to say, if I'm truly, truly empowered, the people around me should thrive.
So here's what I'm going to challenge you. I need you to start writing, please. You know the way you write your other things.
I write work-related
start writing
articles
about this thing. And let me tell you why.
Why?
Because there is a generation of women who need to hear this. They need to hear this. They need to hear this because marriages go through challenges.
That is true.
And to be able to hear this from a woman, so you notice in this podcast I talk a lot, and this one I've been quiet. Simply because you're speaking to something that I have no clue about. And so my challenge to you is, please consider writing.
So let me also say the other thing about feminism that's very difficult is it's not, ironically enough, feminism tells you a woman should be allowed to choose what she wants, except conservative theories. And so if you try and tell, and that's why I say, if a woman is, or a man, because now there's a movement, I don't even know the male movement, which is Men Against. I don't know if you know it, there's like a weird name. Sponsors of the men's conference. I think if you're still in that fighting stage, I don't think you'll listen, Goy. Actually, part of me feels like maybe the biggest remedy for feminism is sounds so cliche, but it's true love and acceptance. And I've seen love humble me. I've seen it allow me to realize, nobody's fighting me. In fact, everyone is for me. My husband is for me. My children are for me. Church, God is for me, right? I don't know the right thing. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I think the biggest struggle I'd have is I'd feel like I'm constantly ever trying to prove and confirm that I'm worthy of,
which comes to my final point. Marion Umeiva. I think you are an authority simply because you're living it out. You don't have it all done. But in many ways, there are some women who have not processed it the way you have. And that's another reason why it's taken me 1 year to get you here. In essence, that's what I'd like to be able to. I mean, if there's any parting shot for you, you blog a lot and write about things in the workspace, but consider doing that on this topic.
I hear you going.
If guys want to follow you and all that, can they?
Oh, yes, they can. So my Instagram is for Shumekia. I just Shumekia. I Shumekia for people. So if you want to be Shumekiaed for, you can follow me on IG. But my LinkedIn is where I write more articles around like faith and work and purpose, which is Marion Wanyoike on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guys, one of the few podcasts where I've been very quiet and I leave on a somber note. Knowing that I've been put in my place, that I know that now I don't know so much.
Oh gosh.
This is Gowi Marco Dinge Marion. Thank you very much.
Say hi to T for me. I shall.
Catch us on YouTube and on Instagram. Tell a friend, a notification button, just click it there. So when we upload something, you'll be notified of when we are on. God bless you. Peace. We're out.